Begin real soon the Nebraska State Board of Education meeting. The January State Board meeting will now come to order. Denise, please call roll.
Lisa Fricke. Present. Patsy Kojohns.
Here.
Deborah Neary.
Present.
Robin Stevens.
Present.
John Witzel.
Here.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Present.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
Present.
All present. Oh, you forgot
Razor wise.
Her name's not on there. Rachel, are you here?
I am here also.
Remember that as we do. Yeah.
So, all are present, is that correct?
Yes, all present.
Very good. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website. Board members, please engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you are done speaking. And please turn off your cell phones. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the December 6 through 7, 2018 State Board of Education meeting?
So move.
Second.
Second, Rachel, Pat. The motion was made by Rachel, seconded by Pat. Is there any discussion on this item? Denise, please call roll.
Nichols.
Yes.
Stevens.
Yes.
Neary.
Yes.
Fricke.
Yes.
Wise.
Yes.
Kojohns.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Witzel.
Yes,
8 yes.
motion passes. Commissioner Bloomstead, are there any recommended changes for today's agenda?
Yes, I actually just have one. Item 9.2 is our bargaining agreement. The process actually kind of works this way for us. The rest of the state also negotiates, and we negotiate separately. We have an agreement in principle, but not yet a written agreement for you to approve. So we'll be bringing that back to you in February.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda
So move.
with the changes?
So move.
Second.
Second, Rachel or Pat. Any discussion? None heard or seen. Denise, please call roll.
Witzel.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Wise.
Yes.
Kojohns.
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Fricke.
Yes.
Stevens.
Yes.
Neary.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you very much, Denise. Now we'll move into organization of the State Board of Education. Before we begin the election of officers, I would like to call your attention that the officers elected at this meeting will serve a one-year term. Next, I would like to request a motion, a four-part motion, indicating that the Commissioner, as Secretary of the State Board, will preside over the nomination and election process, that secret ballots will be used during the election, that the results of each round of voting will be announced by the teller and recorded in the minutes, after which the Commissioner will declare the results, and the ballots and tally sheets will be placed in custody of the Commissioner, who will keep them under seal until the time period for a recount expires, and then they will be destroyed. Do I hear a motion to this effect?
So moved. Second.
Denise, please call roll.
Stevens.
Yes.
Fricke.
Yes.
Kojohns.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Witzel.
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Neary.
Yes.
Wise.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you very much, Denise. And also, I hereby appoint Scott Summers and Laura Seipel as tellers to disseminate and count the ballots. The Commissioner will now preside over the nomination and election process. Commissioner?
So thank you. So first, we'll take up the election of the president. And nominations are now open for President of the State Board of Education. According to Robert's Rules of Order, no seconds are required for nominations. A member may nominate himself or herself. Votes may be cast for any current member of the State Board, even if they are not nominated. So I'd open it for nominations. Maureen.
I nominate John Witzel.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I gotta follow my script and get to the right spot, but seeing none, board members are reminded that a majority of votes cast is required for an election. Abstentions and blank ballots do not count as votes cast. Ineligible ballots or ballots with multiple names or ballots for anyone other than a current state board member are not credited to any candidate. So I'll go ahead and have folks send the ballots around.
Thank you.
This goes without saying, so I'll say it. There's a blank line for name at the bottom of these cards. That is, of course, who you're voting for, as opposed to your name, unless you're voting. Did everybody get one?
Way to go, Scott.
Mr. Secretary, we have 8 votes for John. These are 8 votes.
So congratulations in order for John Witzel, elected president for 2019.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll continue now with nominations are now open for vice president. According to Robert's Rules of Order, no seconds are required for nominations. A member may nominate himself or herself. Votes may be cast for any current member, even if they are not nominated. And so I open nominations. Pat.
I would like to nominate Maureen Nichols as vice president.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations are now closed. Board members are again reminded that a majority of votes cast is required for an election. Abstentions and blank ballots do not count as votes. Ineligible ballots, ballots with multiple names, or ballots for anyone other than a current state board member are not credited to any candidate. So I'll go ahead and have the ballots passed around. And
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner Secretary, I have 8 votes for Maureen Nichols for Vice President.
So the Vice President of the State Board of Education for 2019 is Maureen Nichols. Congratulations. So I think based on our kind of past experiences, we'll spend about, I don't know, 5 minutes seems about appropriate to kind of get ourselves resettled and take a brief recess at this point. I'll turn it over to John for the official.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to make a brief statement, if I may, prior to going into recess. I'm very proud to be a member of this team, and I mean, we got great expectations for 2019. I mean, this is great. We got a great, if you will, enthusiastic team ready to move. Thank you for the opportunity to serve another year as president of the Nebraska State Board of Education. I look forward to providing leadership to the board and working with Maureen Nichols as the vice president and each of you as members. Congratulations, Mo, on your election to the office of vice president. As you do know, we have a constitutional responsibility for the general supervision and administration of the school system of the state. To carry out that responsibility, we will continue in the direction set forth in our strategic plan, which is guided by our mission to lead and support the preparation of Nebraskans for learning, earning, and living. Additionally, we will continue to be guided by this year's theme, Champions for Equity in Education. The board has entrusted the role of commissioner with Dr. Bloomstead. We will continue to look to him for leadership in that role, serving as the administrative head of chief of the department, among other constitutional and statutory duties of the Commissioner of Education. This year, we look forward to continuing to foster relationships with our policy partners, including education organizations, legislature, and governor's office. We look forward to moving forward with revisions to Rule 10, building on our previous conversations on school credibility and accountability. And we'll continue to build on our commitments for equity in education, which the Commissioner outlined at the NDE Day at Administrators Day in July of 2018. Further, I look forward to a collaborative, positive, and purposeful approach to all of our work as State Board of Education. While we may not always agree on topics brought forward before the board, we will work together to fulfill our mission in serving the students, educators, families, and citizens of the great state of Nebraska. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing us to serve. Thank you. No.
And I would just like to say to my colleagues on the board, thank you for putting your trust in me to do this. It's a little scary, but when I get into roles like this, I ask for pre-forgiveness on any of the mistakes that I'll make along the way, and I will. And I hope that all of you will step up to the plate when I make a mistake, when the leadership things that we need to be looking at that we don't know about. As I said to Robin, I'm only a phone call or a mouse click away. But thank you for this opportunity, and I hope I served you well, and I look forward to working with John and the commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes. Board members, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
If I could ask, I think it'd be very important that we say thank you to Pat.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, great. She called me on the phone. She's trying to keep holding my hand. I don't know if she's, it'll be nice to have her closer so we can really hold hands.
If I could add also, Robin, what you just said, she has literally been the continuity in this board in regards to we really value and need in regards to a lot of your, if you will, wisdom with your experiences here. And as the old adage goes, when Pat speaks, people do listen. There's no doubt about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, you got anything to say?
Well, I've been president twice and vice president. No, see. This is why you ask for forgiveness, because they know how to do that. And it's truly been a pleasure. It's one of those things that, we all just have one vote. So that equalizer is there, which I think is very, very important. But I also think it's given me the opportunity to grow in my own skills, and have enjoyed working with the staff over the years. And there's always new challenges, and I wish the two of you the best, and you'll do fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, we'll take a break.
All right.
Members to please turn in your committee preferences to me sometime today. Matter of fact, as soon as you can, that would be great. If you have problems in regards to the form for completion, Ryan has copies, but we do need your preferences this morning. So thank you very much. Get them to me as soon as you can. Thank you. We will now enter into our public comment period. The period of public comment is available for any person who wishes to address the State Board on subjects within its authority. Please note that the public comment should be on topics related to the State Board's constitutional and statutory authority. Thanks to the members of the public who are in attendance today, we have no request for appearance. Regards to other public comment, we will now move to our regular public comment period. I would like to remind you to please sign in if you've not already done so, and there are sign-in cards at the back table. As of now, we have 4 public comment cards turned in, and the public will speak in the order the cards were received. Each member of the public will have 5 minutes to speak during the public comment period. I will announce the name of the speaker and the person who is next, so they are prepared to come forward. Our first speaker is Cindy Kopic, and the secondary on deck is Henry Burke.
Good morning. My name is Cindy Kopich, and I represent more than 28,000 educators, including paraeducators, teachers, and administrators of the state of Nebraska in the Nebraska State Education Association. I would like to congratulate Robin, Deb, Maureen, and Pat, now you're moved around, on their election to serve on the state board. I know that you are all excited to get to work and to make positive change in your ongoing effort to improve the educational opportunities for every child in Nebraska, alongside your fellow board members. Every board member on this board is a leader, selected by your constituents to make decisions based on the knowledge and expertise you have, but also with the information you receive from NDE staff, leaders, community groups, and your constituents. And the best part is that this group of board members are also just great people. Good people that care deeply and want to make a difference in the lives of our students. What an opportunity for our state. Know that the staff of NDE is one of the greatest resources you have. The human capital of this organization is tremendous. And they are also talented staff members here in this room, as well as those listening in today from beyond the walls of this boardroom. You need their support and their knowledge of the day-to-day work in order to do your jobs effectively. I know each one of you will get to know the staff, talk with them, and ask them questions. All of us that have dedicated our lives to the noble profession of teaching our Nebraska students know that information is power. Remember that you each share in the responsibility to provide information and support one another. One of the most important indicators of an effective board is that they share information equitably with one another and listen to the various perspectives. I am excited because after meeting this group and the new members, and getting to know the rest of you over the past 3 years, I know this group will bond as a team and will excel as leaders in their communities and in their state as you work together. This was evident even at the swearing-in ceremony yesterday at the Capitol. You were all there to support and congratulate the newly elected members as early as day one. I stated last month that the state board sets the example for our school board members and their work across the state. This body sets the standard of board service. Our students, educators, Nebraska Department of Ed staff, and the leadership team are all counting on you and rooting for you to make 2019 an outstanding year to be a student in the state of Nebraska. I am excited to watch the amazing work you do together. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much, ma'am. Up next, we have Henry Burke, followed by Wayne Smith.
Good morning. My name is Henry Burke. I would like to discuss the Nebraska Social Studies Standards. In one national survey, 33% of Americans said the Bill of Rights guarantees the right to own your home. 12% said the Bill of Rights includes the right to own a pet. Do these national results alarm you? I certainly hope so. Our goal should be to provide a high-quality K-12 education for all Nebraska students. If done properly, students will be well prepared to enter college or careers and become productive members of society. With good knowledge-based standards, students will receive a high-quality education, test scores will improve, graduation rates will increase, and Nebraska will have a better educated citizenry. If the standards that were adopted for Nebraska over the last 10 years were truly great standards, increased academic achievement would show up on the national ACT exams. Likewise, poor state standards would lead to mediocre results on the national tests. Are the Nebraska standards leading to improved national test scores? Not at all. In fact, just the opposite. The latest ACT report shows the percent of students who met college readiness benchmarks from 2014 to 2018. English percentages dropped from 72% in 2014 to 56% in 2018. Mathematics percentages slid from 45% in 2014 to 35% in 2018. Reading percentages dropped from 48% in 2014 to 40% in 2018. And science percentages dropped from 42% in 2014 to 33% in 2018. In 2018, only 22% of Nebraska students met all 4 college readiness benchmarks. Over the 5-year period, Nebraska students meeting all 4 benchmarks dropped from 29% in 2014 to 22% in 2018. In every case, Nebraska students slid downhill over the last 5 years. Does this suggest a change of direction is needed in Nebraska education? The answer is rather obvious. I have been recommending for quite a few years that we need solid Type 1 education standards in Nebraska. In order to have excellent Type 1 state standards, they need to be explicit, knowledge-based or fact-based, academic, clearly worded, grade level specific, and measurable. In the written report I sent on Tuesday, I provided examples to show why the Nebraska 2012 social studies standards do not meet the Type 1 criteria. The knowledge-based or fact-based parameter means that the standard elements must refer to traditional subject content. The academic parameter means that the standard elements must be scholarly instead of being aimed toward indoctrination. The grade level specific parameter means the standards must set clear goals for teachers and students to reach at each grade level or course. When these 6 parameters are not satisfied, the result is Type 2 education. Let's apply these parameters to civics. Wouldn't you want a civics class to teach students how democracy got started and explains the structure of American government? Wouldn't you want students to read and understand the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights? I've got my pocket copy right here. Very easy to read. So what does a Type 2 education yield? It produces students who can organize a protest demonstration, yet they can't tell you why they are demonstrating. They can do community organizing, but they can't offer a fact-based reason why they are supporting a particular candidate or cause. We need strong Type 1 standards in Nebraska. I urge you to utilize the Type 1 educational philosophy when you are developing and writing your Nebraska social studies standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Up next is Mr. Wayne Smith, followed by Rachel Pinkerton.
Good morning. I'm a retired accountant, so I'm not an educator. But my comments relate to the revision of the social study standards. The standards start by stating the purpose which is to achieve the purpose requires teaching Nebraska students to become responsible citizens. I've read the 2012 standards and I've submitted two suggested additions, one of which I want to highlight today. Under Standard 12.2.6, which states, students will understand economic concepts that support rational decision-making, I recommend that one be added, which is to research the decisions made that will increase your chances of staying out of poverty. In this, discuss the success sequence, which is to graduate from high school, get a job, get married, and then have children. 97% of millennials who follow the success sequence do not end up in poverty once they reach young adulthood. Now, this is according to Dr. Brad Wilcox. In the book, Creating the Opportunity Society by Ron Haskins and Isabel Sawhill, it states that if none of these steps are followed, they have a 76% chance of being poor. Following all three steps, their chance of being poor is only 2%. A similar formula is to finish high school, don't have a child before you are 20, and get married before you have that child. Follow that formula and you will not be poor. Fail to follow that formula and there is a substantial chance you will be poor. This is according to Larry Elder. Now, I've been told you can't talk about this type of thing in schools, but I can't understand why you wouldn't talk about the success sequence if your purpose requires teaching students to become responsible citizens and to keep them out of poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The last speaker is Rachel Pinkerton.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your efforts as volunteers, our elected board members. I have, I too hope that 2019 will be a year that we'll look back on with joy and pride for moving the needle, especially on literacy. One of our new board members mentioned the learning curve on the legislation that's relevant. I've been carrying around the Nebraska Dyslexia Association accomplishments in 2018 that refers to LB 1052, that is going to bring us appropriate, effective instruction for students with characteristics of dyslexia beginning in July 2019. Dyslexia education in all teacher ed programs, and LB 1081, universal screening 3 times a year to students in K-3, individual reading improvement plan provided for students who fall below the threshold level of performance. Proper implementation of this bipartisan legislation, I think, can really move the needle on literacy, and that is so significant, not the least of which we're told nationally that 85% of the children in the juvenile justice system are functionally illiterate. I was at, some Omaha people may recognize this as the North Omaha, Omaha North Viking Center on December 9th. This gentleman is Leo Lewis II with the Malcolm X Foundation, and this was a Sunday meeting, community meeting on the town hall on the topic of elementary school suspensions. And it was a great meeting. There were some impressive parent voices talking about their own experience and giving suggestions of how to get help with behavioral improvement with elementary school children. He's also co-hosting a town hall on Tuesday the 22nd of this month on the topic of the school-to-prison pipeline. And if anybody wants more details, I will be glad to get those to you. It's at the First Methodist Church by the Crossroads. It's a town hall meal and discussion. So as I look at the, oh, and by the way, yeah, I was happy to be able to gift you with a copy of my friend Lavonne Dennis Williams' book. And I ask you to think about what her voice means in terms of getting the history of institutional racism on the record with kids, and some awareness of what that legacy means and how we overcome it. So, and then on that same topic, we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of, as we've discussed before, about the race riot and the Will Brown tragedy. So I'm as I look at the social studies standards, seems like a pretty homogeneous writing group. I wish we had a broader representation of our citizenry in creating those standards. And then in conclusion, give a pitch to the Joe Foss Institute Civic Education Program. I know when there was an effort made to legislate these a graduation requirement of needing to take pass the test that naturalized citizens pass, a 100-question test. And I think there was discussion that we didn't need legislation because we can, our department can set that standard. So let's do that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pinkerton. Thank you, ma'am. With the public comments completed, we'll move on to the commissioner's report and agenda overview.
I'm actually going to move over there to share a few slides on a PowerPoint, so I'll go ahead and do that really quick. Kind of as I do this, always thank for public comment. I mean, I don't get a lot of chance to respond, but always appreciate folks coming in and being able to offer opinions on the work that we have. So thank you very much for that. I will start with this, and perhaps it's not so much start with this, but we're very much in the middle of a year where our theme was Champions for Equity, and I wanted to provide a little bit of a sense of a reminder of the importance of this work, the importance of what we've done on strategic plan, the importance of our year ahead, and a little bit of reflection on some things that have happened in the past year, and things that I think we have to work on relative to the future. So I start again just kind of remembering that Champions for Equity piece, and really being thoughtful about that. A lot of our work, and I again credit not just you as board members, but all of the board members that we've had over time. And I think I shared with you just kind of an email that, and I hadn't really ever thought about it before, but there's been 15 different board members that have worked with me over a period of 5 years. And creating consistency in the direction that we're going has been a paramount kind of goal, I think, of the board and all the board members that have served. But I think it's really important that we know and understand that the strategic plan has become a big part of that effort that we pull together. I actually find it interesting, sometimes when we run into disagreements, it's actually disagreements about how we accomplish something instead of what we ought to accomplish. And I think that's actually an amazing amount of progress for us as we go forward. I've really seen this board shape itself to be thoughtful policymakers in the sense that it wasn't always thought of as the policymaking body that was going to drive results in the state of Nebraska. And I think that's a real big change for us. I think what we've seen at a national level, including what's happened on ESSA and other fronts, has put us in a position that we must lead. We must do that particular work. I think even the public comment, when we're being asked, they're asking for us to provide leadership, right, about certain key indicators, the direction that we're going to go. And we have a lot of influence and power over what happens in the education system across the state of Nebraska. And so, but it's us pulling together that are going to make those things happen. And so I very much appreciate that work. And all of this starts really with your vision for that work. And I play a unique role of trying to understand how all of your unique perspectives and the things that you bring to the table are important in taking full advantage of the group of people that are always on the board thinking about what's best for education and finding ways that we get that done. And then I also find my way of translating that to an agency that has to share that particular work as well. I think, just as an example, and I sometimes forget who was there when we had certain conversations over certain periods of time. When I first started as commissioner, the Department of Education had a mission statement, and the State Board of Education had a different mission statement. And I always thought that was very telling, that was a disconnect. It didn't make sense to me somehow, walking into this important role that I feel I am supposed to play, that the board's mission did not align ultimately with the department's mission. And I think Rachel was president when I first started, and it's like it didn't make a lot of sense. So we spent some time going, how do we set goals when those two missions are actually very, very different? And in fact, a lot of folks didn't necessarily understand, and a lot of people that come to the State Board of Education or witness what the State Board of Education, I think they clearly understand education is part of our responsibility, but this notion of service to clients, from vocational rehabilitation, from disability determination systems, that we have a substantial role in the quality of life, the fulfillment of life, the fulfillment of all Nebraskans. And I think that all piece of the puzzle is part of our desire to be champions, really champions for equity across the state of Nebraska, and serving our schools is part of that, serving the students that are in our schools, but also serving adult learners that are part of adult basic education, or adults that have disabilities that are in VR, or adults that have disabilities that we have to function and help provide and identify whether or not they're qualified for disability services. So there's a lot of work that comes into that. And so I really am proud of the mission that we've settled on to lead and support the preparation of all Nebraskans for learning, earning, and living. And when you think about that notion of those things are connected, it doesn't say or living, it says and. This notion of the power of meaning of and, it means all of those things. And we have, again, a responsibility. Even hearing public comment again today, tying that back to the standards and the expectations of the learning that we need to do to ensure that Nebraskans are successful is really an important part of that. And so I think this mission is actually very, very powerful. When I've shared it in other settings, people go, well, that's a really powerful mission statement. And so thank you for continuing to support that mission. Thanks to the board members that were present at the time that we said this ought to be our mission statement, but it's very powerful to me. Certainly we have adopted our strategic vision and direction, and we'll see if I can actually open this up and make this work somewhat. I just wanted to remind you that on this particular website, our vision and direction is out there. And one of the things we know that we're going through right now is the kind of independent review of what our progress is. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you, and I know they'll come back when we had conversations at the last board meeting about this, but we'll actually have a report in February talking about how are we doing on various goals, what are the recommendations around how this can be processed and done differently. And I wanted to remind you and any of our goals, the real desire is to be able to go through and pick a given goal and be able to look at a report for that goal. I think I shared this very site with you last year. This is going to be updated with the new recommendations, the new data that's available to us, right? So as we go, this is a tool for us to keep using and building, and so we can see progress, track progress, and be intentional about how we go about doing that over the long haul. Certainly, the agency organization is one of those goals, and I smile just a little bit. I think this might have been, at least based on a slide, based on conversations I had with you, that I had once said our goals are pretty ambitious. When you look at our goals, and anytime we have a goal, we know we can't necessarily do that goal all by ourselves, that we have to think as a system. We have to work together ultimately to make that happen. And I joked with staff, I think when I shared this with them, I said one of my favorite quotes, I think it's my quote, I actually am the one who said it, so I don't know if that makes it better somehow, but it's one of my favorite quotes. Goals that we can accomplish alone, and I don't even have it spelled right on there, so there you go. Obviously I can't do it without spell check, are not sufficiently ambitious goals, right? And so the reality is we work better when we're working together. We can't accomplish those things on our own as it goes, including a little grammar check there. Anyway, so I'll move quickly off that slide. The reality for us is another big topic, and it's been a big topic for years, right? Moving from building an accountability system to having the Elementary and Secondary Education Act reauthorized from No Child Left Behind to the Every Student Succeeds Act has been a major undertaking. And in part, it's been a major undertaking. I've talked to other states that did that on the side of their other work, right? We made that work about the holistic system of education in the state of Nebraska and continue to do that. And by the way, sometimes that's not very easy to accomplish. Sometimes pulling what we imagined was best for Nebraska underneath AQuest and shaping and molding the expectation around the federal accountability system together has been a substantial challenge. And the reality for us as we do that, we continue to press very hard to ensure that that's part of our work. Among the realities is taking a look at what we've done with the Nebraska Education Profile. And again, another tool set built largely in-house with the types of measures and metrics that are required underneath both the AQuest system, but also required underneath federal accountability, and tying that together and making a reporting system where you can look at it from a state data perspective and see those types of things. I know Mr. Burke had kind of mentioned about ACT, right, and over that time frame. Well, the other changes that take place, we're trying to track those data. But one of the changes that took place, we didn't, at the beginning of a 5-year time frame, we didn't test all students on ACT in the state of Nebraska. That's been a policy shift that's happened over a period of time that gives us a solid baseline for us to be able to go, how are we going to grow that? What are the key investments that we can make as an education system that are going to help us improve the results for our students across the state of Nebraska? And that's important things to watch. And it's good to be reminded of those are important data elements for us to continue to look at. But it's also important that we look at a lot of the other data that are required. You know, certainly one of our big things has been how are we doing with attendance across the state? One of the things we included into the ESSA plan is looking at attendance and looking at chronic absenteeism as a key measure. I mean, that's new. We've included that now in our system, and that's a new metric. But it makes a lot of sense that it's among our metrics that we pay attention to, because when we identify students that are not coming to school for whatever reasons, and we can be attentive to what that student's needs are, we can make a real difference. And then when we look at it at a big statewide picture, are we making progress on that? Are we doing a good job? Now, I would tell you on a national level, our attendance rate looks great. But guess what? In our schools that are needs improvement, often that's not the case. Often that's one of the challenges that we need to address. And so when we continue to look at the different data that we have, how students are performing across the state, the fact that we set very high standards in the state of Nebraska relative to the expectations that are being assessed in Nebraska, I think is really important. Again, we built new assessment systems over the last 5 years that I think put us in a position to actually be able to lead the nation in how we think about integrating state assessment into meaningful work at a classroom level. And I know we get pushed. We had this conversation just last December, I guess, and I had meetings that included administrators going, why is the data so late? And I'm going, I know it's so late. It's not where we want that, right? So we put very much a stake in the ground, said that schools need that data by June 1st. To ensure that they can make educational decisions that are sound for them. What we've actually done is created not just a system that says the state assessment's over here and is going to measure us absent what it means for us from a educational strategy standpoint at a classroom level. They want those things integrated, and I think that's been a unique part of the Nebraska system in our journey, and building a system that gets that done is absolutely critical to, I know, all of us. So we continue to do that. You can look at this site and find a lot of things. I'm going to highlight this one from an equity perspective. In the long run, we are just making a shift as changes underneath ESSA now, that we actually have to get to building level financial data. Basically cut my teeth, I guess is the way I can put it in that sense, on state aid in the state of Nebraska and the policies that drives. And I became fascinated with the importance of equity as it related to school finance, and how it related to property tax equity, and how it related to educational outcome equity, and how it related to a system of education that makes a difference for all of our students. And so now that we have this change, being just for the first time, we're gathering data after a lot of work of our team and a lot of work of folks all across the state to get to a building level financial data that's really important for us as we consider where to direct resources and how to be analyzing the resources that make a difference for our students and all across the state. So that's very critical work that's taking place on a regular basis for the state of Nebraska. And all of this data that's available here, you can dive very deep into it. You can look school by school. You can look across large data systems. And one of the things, and I won't exactly share it with you right now, but as you look at a district or a school, we've set up kind of these peer analytics with this. And we had questions from superintendents and others across the state, well, how are you getting these peer things done? And I'm fascinated as they call our research team going, what's this mean? There's a whole bunch of reasons to compare schools for different things, from poverty rates certainly to the size of school. But as we are able to get more complex in analytics that we're able to just hand to folks, they can use that information to drive other decisions, and I think that's really important for us as well. So we continue to work across the state to ensure that that's a possibility for us. This is what I call my C-SPAN famous moment. Yeah. I don't know, there's nowhere where I've seen a picture that looks good. So I took these are probably the best ones. Means I talk a lot. The reality, I want to give you a little bit of the inside story, I think, of how I got to this moment in time, right? I was in DC, and actually NASB was also in DC at that same time frame. CCSSOs, so the Council of Chief State School Officers, we were having conversations about kind of in a regular meeting, but we were also right in the middle of our ESSA plan. And I was experiencing what I would call some frustration in that tough work of aligning what Nebraska wanted to do with what the expectations were around the federal law. And not so much the federal law, but the interpretation of the federal law from the U.S. Department of Education. And we had fairly tense moments and tense conversations in exchanges about, well, we want to do this. I listened to the board very carefully. We want the system to look this way and to be able to be tied together. And I was getting very frustrated, quite frankly, with the progress that we were able to make in that setting, and felt like we were in a kind of a zone of bureaucratic, discord, if you want to call it that. And not that that would ever happen in DC. But the reality for us was that we kept pressing, and we actually kept listening. So the folks that were on the other end of the phone sometimes, or the folks that were conversing with us from the U.S. Department of Ed, were working also very, very hard on a lot of different states' plans. And we were having conversations with a lot of different states. And it turned out that Senator Alexander had come to our meeting, and I probably at the prompting, I know that both Brian and Deb were at that meeting, but somewhat at the prompting of the deputies to kind of ask a question. He was trying to get off the stage almost, and I had the one more question, and I'm going, our struggle had been, and he talked about equity in states that didn't have plans that really addressed equity in a meaningful way. And I'm thinking to myself there, if you really understood what our struggle was with the U.S. Department of Education, it's not about our commitment to equity. It's about our commitment to the type of approach that we wanted and thought would work in Nebraska to address equity, right? And so we had that type of discord. And so I asked Senator Alexander, I actually said, hey, look, I've thought highly of you for a long time. I've appreciated your service
this. But I feel like right now that Nebraska is trying to get done the very same things that I hear you want states to get done, but I feel as if there's a discord between the federal government and state government. And it's our responsibility to provide leadership in a systemic type of way that helps our schools. And I feel like that discord is falling apart and I can't get done what we need to get done. And we're writing an ESSA plan and struggling with those various things. And anyway, he eventually answers and said, I think maybe we ought to hold some hearings on this, on after the states get that implemented, that we ought to come forward and do that. And so my invitation months later, because that would have been roughly in March, this was roughly in September, came through his office to go testify there and talk about what was happening in Nebraska. It's an interesting moment to testify in D.C. I was sitting at a desk somewhat like this and looking at a group of senators. And in D.C., they sit left and right, Democrats and Republicans. I didn't really know what to expect. I testified many times in certainly in our state capitol, but it was a different type of setting. And we were asked many questions. Largely the Democrats were there, who had also pressed hard to ensure that hearing was taking place, was happening. And again, I showed up and I thought to myself, what a fascinating environment. It didn't feel all that unfamiliar to me. I've been in those types of hearing rooms just to visit or have meetings or other things, so at least that was there. But there was a whole bunch of these folks, and you can see it in the picture somewhat to the right, that were wearing red shirts, and they were there to protest guns and the things that have been talked about, guns in schools and these fronts. And I just remember kind of interacting with those groups, because I'm sitting up there waiting for someone to come up, and at the end of it, was I think they had like Moms Against Violence in Schools, and those types of important things. And regardless of all their different positions, they were extremely polite, extremely good to us. And we got asked questions, and I know you can watch the video of how I answered those particular questions. The funny part is I didn't answer them any different than I'd answer them if you asked me that question or the governor asked me that question or anyone else. I answered it the way that I think is right for Nebraska, I think is right for what our work is and our goals. And I think that's a really telling thing. So I was actually the red state there, very red state in comparison. And many of the Democrats came up to me and said, oh, I'm so surprised because you're from Nebraska that we support that. I had many of the Republicans, including Senator Alexander, come up and go, you're just trying to do the right things by your students, and we can see that, right? Let's do the right things by our students. It's a powerful position for us to be in. I'm super pleased to have been able to do that. I will tell you right at the end of that, a couple of the representatives, leaders of the groups that were wearing the red shirts came up to me and said, thank you for your comments, appreciate what you're doing. We can tell you have passion for education in Nebraska and for students. And I said, I might have been afraid of all of you in red shirts, and you had moms there. And over my shoulder in this other picture, you can just see the top of her head is my wife. And I told them, I said, the mom I'm most afraid of in this whole room is my wife that happened to be behind me. And they gave her a shirt, and she ended up talking with some of them. People are people, right? And we can provide leadership by doing what's right. That's what our strategic plan has been about. That's what our work is about. I really appreciated the opportunity to do this. It was a great learning experience in a lot of ways, but it also demonstrated to me that what we're doing is the right things. It doesn't mean we have it all figured out. Doesn't mean we're making the progress we yet want to make. But we are putting the right things together to make a real difference for students in the state of Nebraska. So I use some of this. I call on all of us to continue to be champions for equity, that we're thoughtful about what's happening in classrooms and schools and districts and the state with all of our responsibilities at the department. We shared this human dignity commitment from a group of organizations. I think we have to continue to challenge anything that becomes a derogatory comment, that is thoughtful about how we ensure that every student across the state of Nebraska, regardless of race or disability, is successful. That's our work for us to do. I really think it's important. We supported a lot of the Be Kind work, and I have a few pictures here. I didn't really get into great detail of these pictures during the speech at Administrator Days, but the picture to the left is me with two students at Druid Hill.
The picture in the middle is the historic poverty that you find on Native American communities and how families have struggled. The picture in the underneath the communities is a picture of a quilt over at the Historical Society, as a sense of there's so many communities with such great pride, and our communities continue to change. And the picture on Be Kind to One Another is Dean Jacobs, leading a group of kids from Santee on a canoeing trip on the Niobrara. Even though they've grown up there their whole lives, had never gone on a canoeing trip. And I think to myself, just little things that we can do to help one another be all the better is what our work is about. And we'll continue to do that work, and we'll continue to drive that forward. So that's what I share with you. So I thank you for letting me take a little soapbox moment. But I really do thank you for being here. I think we got some great things that are going to accomplish in this next year. We're going to take on some real issues. We got real issues to work on, but I know we can do that collectively. So I'll end there and take questions if you had them. So, or I'll go sit back over there and take your questions, just because it's so much more comfortable over there.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I do think we all concur and support the important direction that we take with an equity perspective. And one of the things that I think might be of value, and I don't know if in February, if they're doing the report with the strategic plan, what our timeline is there, but to really come back and if you could provide some, presentation to the board similar today, but more of, so where are we from a policy and regulatory perspective? What are we putting into practice? I think we've come a long way in establishing philosophically, this is the vision, this is the direction that we need to go. But I think we probably still have some work to do. And I think understanding what our work to do is, not what's accomplished, but what the work is to ensure that our policy and regulatory framework is supporting that philosophical belief around equity, and in particular around resource equity. I think we've not spent much time at all in delving into resource equity and establishing what truly is our policy direction as it relates to resource equity. As we move into the expectation with us of the school-based reporting that's occurring, I feel like we need to ensure we're in front of it, not behind it, and that we've got our policy direction in place forward as that reporting piece comes into play over this next year.
Yeah, and can I just highlight one thing? Because I think what we're trying to transition the agency, so using data to actually set direction instead of responding to it. And I think that's exactly the point that Rachel's making on that front. Yeah.
One of the things that struck me in public comment that I thought we should pay careful attention to, I found it particularly poignant as I work with equity, and that is being intentional about who we bring in to help us write and create whatever it is that we're doing. You know, I talked to you about this morning about the equity lens and how I intentionally made sure that there was representation from a lot of diverse people. And I know that's hard for us, but I think we have to very carefully make sure that our representation is diverse.
Absolutely.
A quick question. We began work on the little card of equity, and we wanted to make it Nebraska's equity, so we have it here. How soon are we leading that way?
Nancy just updated me on her.
Yes, I met with 8 very carefully chosen, diverse people. They worked really hard on it with me for several hours, and then we narrowed down, and the 2 of us that worked on it to have a product to show you. I didn't think that this was probably particularly the greatest meeting. Probably the next meeting when we have, I'll put it on the agenda. But it's ready for you to take a look at and work, and I'm so excited about showing it to you. And we changed everything to make it Nebraska.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Thank you for doing that.
It's there.
Thank
It's
you.
there, and I'm proud of the work of the people that worked with me, and I'm proud of myself for pushing it.
I'm proud of you too.
Quick question. What's the timeline for having the building level data available? Do you-
Yeah, so microphone just is a,
Oh,
is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah, building level data.
Building-
Or
you-
financial data.
So actually, in the current year, we're actually gathering that, so next year, that will be available based on this current year that we're in, right? I think I said that right, so. Well, so thanks, I'll go take my seat back over there and we'll, continue on. Thanks.
Dr. Four.
So, President Witzel, we have Leslie Donnelly here, if we wanted to take up that one case to respect her time.
To
As I
respect your
got on
time
a
as
roll.
well. Ms. Donnelly, Scott Summers got to ask you, do we need to go into executive session with the next action item that we have on our agenda in regards to the case of Larry Davis versus the commissioner? Do we need to go into executive session?
The board need not go into executive session. Any board member or board may choose to go into executive session if they have questions and wish to deliberate and receive advice of legal counsel.
Very good.
One of those things.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. With that, we will move on to our action items. Or, excuse me, Dr. Ford, did you want, or, oh, I understand. Okay. We'll go into our action items now. In regards to action item, considering the hearing officer's recommended decision in NDE case number 18-15, Larry Davis versus the commissioner. Do I hear a motion on regards to this action item?
Mr. President,
I'm a little nervous here. This is my first big deal here. I don't know if I can handle it. I move to adopt the hearing officer's recommended findings of fact, conclusions of law and decisions in NDE case number 18-15, Larry Davis versus the commissioner.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Rob and seconded by Pat. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Co-Johns,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Nichols,
yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
and Fricky.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you very much. In regards to action item 9.2, due to the commissioner's statement earlier, that will be held for another time. Okay, back to that. Action item,
We could return to the commissioner's report now.
okay. We're going to take a quick break and come back to Dr. Ford's comments, or commissioner's comments.
So take a 5-minute.
Sure. Board will now take a 5-minute break. Excuse me, good morning. We'll come back to session. Commissioners' report. We'll start off with the legislative priorities with the Deputy Commissioner Halstead.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner. As you're all well aware, the 106th Legislature has started its first session. They are on day 3 of a 90-day session. So there's only 87 more days to go. And if you actually note the calendar they have set, their last day will be the 75th anniversary of the D-Day invasion of France.
Wow.
So I did check my history and know my Constitution and social studies. So in the sense of what's attached to the agenda is the legislative priorities and regulatory priorities that the board adopted last October. I think you all are familiar with that document. That is the document that is guiding the staff, the commissioner, and the board in any bills that are introduced in the Nebraska legislature. It is what we've used when we've had conversations with senators who contact us as to the types of legislation the board has indicated the department would be supportive of. Yesterday was the first day they introduced bills, and at the moment they are currently introducing a few more bills today. As to how many bills get introduced in this session is an open question, but it can be as few as 500 and as many as, I don't want to state how many it can be, but it can be voluminous in some years. I want you all to know that the department has a long-standing tradition. If a senator calls and says, I've got a piece of legislation, would you look at it and give us input? We and the staff of the department provide them with input. What you need to know is just because we gave them input does not mean we support, oppose, whatever the bill, and sometimes that gets lost in the communications because people will then talk to others and say, well, the department looked at this and didn't see any problems. Well, that may be the case. That doesn't mean this board decides the bills when they're introduced that the department and staff will support before the legislature. I know one activity that you're all supposed to be doing is putting in your committee priorities that you'd like to be on, and the legislative committee is going to play a major role from this point until your February meeting to advise the commissioner and the president of the state board on any bills. Because hearings start on January 16th, so there will be almost 3 weeks of opportunities for hearings on bills before you come back and meet again. So I'm going to stop there, and Commissioner, if there's anything else you'd like to say or questions.
No, I mean, I do think the legislative committee worked last year for having this. It is helping us to also be able to interact with legislators. I hope it helps all of you. I do think there's a chance to kind of build on this year, to look at that a little bit differently. Maybe, as Brian pointed out, and I know that the committee selection, it will be important to have that legislative committee, so we have a chance to bounce things around with that committee between now and the February meeting, as Brian mentioned. So.
Yes, Rachel.
Just a quick question. I don't know if it's possible to maybe send the full board some updates in the interim, since we're not doing the meetings the way we've done before, of some of the things that are happening. I think maybe for the full board to get a sense of, for example, some of the items that maybe you're proposing as a part of technical cleanup, which bills to maybe monitor. Just give us a little bit of some things from your perspective of things to keep our eye on. Might be helpful, as most of us will be trying to keep an eye on all that's going on. Thank you.
Lisa.
I think that's a good idea, that it go to the full board so we can all have that something in mind when we begin deciding. I was going to ask, I know we have our priorities like this on the website. I also know that in here we decide what we support or oppose. once we decide what we support or maybe stay neutral in, can we have that on the website? There are many organizations that do that, and I don't remember if I don't think we do that specifically, do we?
The answer is yes, and we've done it before in the past. That's our intention to do it going forward.
But not since my tenure, have we?
No, it's actually been out there on the website. It's just where we prominently displayed it or not. Maybe the question right now, if you go to the state board webpage,
Yeah.
there's your priority document there.
This document is right there. I'm
We
talking
intend
about-
to, if you take positions on bills, there'll be a document there that says these are the bills the board and department are supporting or opposing or neutral on, whatever in that regard. Any of that stuff will be out there publicly available. There are organizations who want the NDE staff analysis document that you'll all get
Yeah.
at the February meeting because they like to see how we analyze a bill and everything
Right.
else. And believe it or not, those private organizations share theirs with us, so we have some idea what NSEA or NCSA or the school boards is saying. So it's helpful to see perspectives from all those organizations. So.
And then having that where we support or stay neutral, right where this priority is, right up front would be really nice. So, thank you.
And just as you were talking about that, another thing, and Brian did a great job with staff on kind of instructions on how to analyze bills here this, well, I guess, whatever day that was, sometime recently. The reality for we have a lot of different staff involved with bill analysis now. There's a lot of changes in the legislative arena, and obviously as we watched how various chair positions were established, I want all of you to know that our staff gets called on a lot over in that legislative arena. It's a different type of environment that we have, what I'll say is a bit of a responsibility to provide objective information for them. But as we have a lot of turnover that happens there, sometimes that gets a little bit muddier, and so your positions are actually helpful for us to kind of maneuver in an ever-changing environment. So I do appreciate that. I know from even my own history, and then a lot of the longtime staffers that I worked with, even when I worked over in the legislature, the level of regard that staff and senators have for our staff at the department is very, very high, and that's something that I think we should all take a great deal of pride in as well. So thanks to our staff, thanks to Brian who leads that, and thanks to everyone at the agency that pulls those pieces together. It's pretty complex in a mechanism perspective, but also just a lot of credible information that comes together as a result of that. So.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, go ahead.
I was watching the committee, the voting on the chairs the other day, and for those of you that didn't see it, when Senator Groney stood up and nominated himself and gave his rationale of why he felt he wanted to be chair again, he was very complimentary of Commissioner Bloomstead and talked about he felt he had good relationships with the NDE and especially with Commissioner Bloomstead, and that was very rewarding for me to hear, and I hope that that can move forward in a very positive direction.
John?
Thank you, Mo. Yeah, Lisa.
I saw that as well, and it's great that we have that relationship. And you mentioned the staff. I didn't realize the changes you mentioned and their role in working with the legislative staff. I just know our NDE staff work behind the scenes all the time to get information to us and all that they do to keep NDE moving fairly smoothly when they can. But we all appreciate their dedication and work. They don't always hear it, so I thought.
One of those things, resolution to say more this year, I guess, but yeah, very much
yeah.
appreciate our staff that does amazing work.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Commissioner orientation?
Yeah, so actually I'm gonna have Ryan come up. I think he has a few kind of items to share with you, and we'll we'll put it under the title of orientation anyway, so thanks for asking.
So, many of you are familiar with the monthly procedures, and some of you are getting familiar with those. You'll notice that there's a legal size folder at your seat each month, largely dealing with expense reimbursement materials, but other things that we are asking for you to complete and pay attention to conduct your role as a state board member. Questions about specific items in those can go to Laura, and questions about expense reimbursements can go directly to Jason Gomez. So make sure that you're continuing to look through those folders to see what is in there and what items need attention to. Board Member Wise mentioned the strategic plan and the report on that, and I'll take a moment to update you on the process of that. Since the December board meeting, our independent contractors and their subcontractors have met with the staff in 2 different settings, in 2 different groups and expanded groups. And so work is continuing on looking at where we are and assessing where we are in each of those goals, as the Commissioner alluded to earlier. And I look forward to recommendations coming back to the board through the Strategic Plan Performance and Improvement Committee at the December meeting.
You mean
with, what did I say, December?
December, yeah.
Where am I? We were talking about December before. At the February meeting. At the February
We've
meeting.
slowed things down a lot this year.
We're going to wait 12 more months. At the February meeting, with an update on that and opportunity for discussion by the full board on that report. You'll notice in that folder I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of handouts related to your responsibilities as elected officials with the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission. Laura will send an email if she hasn't already with some more information on that. If you have questions as individuals with respect to that, I encourage you to direct those to General Counsel Scott Summers or Deputy Commissioner Halstead, and they can help you with those, but wanted to draw your attention to those. Next is the really fun part, and you'll notice that there's a special folder at your seat this month, and I placed this paper at the front of that. And I ask you first to turn to the very back behind that salmon colored sheet. A couple of times today the committee membership request form has been mentioned. So if you needed another copy of that, that's provided for you there to give to President Witzel by the end of the meeting today. If you don't need that, maybe you can record what you wrote down and then you'll remember what those were. I'd like to take an opportunity to talk through some of the, what I'll call my favorite parts of the policy reference manual to draw your attention to on an annual basis. And so at the very front of that folder, I'd placed a document that looks like this, and I'm going to go to that on Spark right now for your review. And so I've outlined here some things to draw your attention to that many of you are familiar with, and some good reminders for the beginning of the year. So one of the things is that policy reference manual. You may have a red binder of that that you got when you came on board. Also, that is available online, and if you're needing help navigating that, feel welcome to reach out and we can help you navigate through that. And so there's 3 types of documents that you've heard talked about in that policy reference manual. Internal policy directives, what you as a board are telling us we need to do. And one of those that I highlight is P2, which is referred to as line and staff regulations. And I've highlighted some pieces in each of those. And so so this one really outlines that relationship between the board and the staff, right? And so knowing that the board hires the commissioner and the commissioner is responsible for the rest of that staff. And part of that relates to another board policy too with respect to requests for staff assistance, and that those come through our office, through the commissioner's office. I also have shared with you a copy of this flyer, which is one that we provide to staff on an annual basis about communicating with state board members. And so, so we'll provide this to them shortly, as we do on an annual basis, as well as some other pieces with protocol for committees and things like that that we'll talk about briefly here. The intent with that is that it's not that we don't want staff members to talk to board members. We do, and we know that's going to happen. We know that those relationships, as Cindy from NSEA mentioned, will foster and are important. What the intent is that when there are requests for information about programs, information about agenda items, that we keep those requests central so that the commissioner is apprised of those, and so that we can be aware too that we're making the best effort to answer that question in full. And so sometimes a question, if it were to go to an individual, we might want to make sure that there's other places in the agency or even outside the agency where we would get information for you. And so please direct those to me, to the commissioner, so that we can best equip you with the information. If you look then at Roman numeral 2, bylaws on internal rules and practices to the state board's own operations and meetings, there's quite a few here that I'd encourage you to take a look at between now and the, I almost said December again, the February meeting. You got to meet at least 4 times a year. The February meeting. One of those that's probably most of interest to you, and hopefully you looked at before today, is that one on board committees, right? That describes what the purpose of each of those board committees are. If you're wondering sometimes why we do what we, or why you do what you do, and why our advice comes a certain way, take a look at B8, which relates to parliamentary procedure and rules of order. The statute that I cited there and provided you a copy with describes the organization of the board and what you did earlier today in electing your officers. So that is an interesting piece of information, or a good piece of information for you to know. With respect to legal assistance, that's outlined with B11, and as you have questions that align with that bylaw item, feel welcome to reach out to the General Counsel's office, specifically Scott Summers. B14 talks about the staff research and assistance, and I talked about that earlier with policy B2 on the relationships between the board and the staff. B16 outlines the reimbursement for expenses policies, and so I mentioned before, questions on that can go directly to Jason Gomez. I also included in there the first page of the State Board of Education monthly reports. And so the reason that you do those monthly reports is outlined in B16. So B16 says the board members will make a regular report of their activities. And so we've revised that form for those of you on the board before this month. That's a new form in Word format. I think it's more user-friendly, and I hope it is. Rachel's saying yes. We've taken your feedback from the last 7 or 8 months that we've done that, and we'll continue to do that again for the next year to make major changes to that. If you're not seeing those posted to Spark yet, they will be posted for the record, so that those, and if you haven't sent those yet, feel welcome to yet today or anytime in the near future. The last one on here, B17, number 6, public statements by board members. A reminder on that about who can speak for the board. And of course, that's the president, unless directed otherwise by the president. A great example of model and practice where I see B17 happening is Board Member Wise writes a monthly article for her local papers. And at the end of that, she puts the statement in B17 saying, these are not the views of the state board, they are of my own. That's not the word for word, but it's in there for you to pull from that if you choose to do something similar. The other type of items, Roman numeral 3, that's in the policy manual are position statements. And so what's different about the position statements is they aren't necessarily something to follow, but they are, and what I mean by that is we follow the policy directives that you line out for us you follow your bylaws, then those position statements are these statements to the world that says, this is what the board believes about this. So I give an example there of the model policy for pregnant and parenting students. And so you'll see a handful of those as well. All of these items come through the policy committee typically for recommendation to the full board as a point of note. I'll move to item 2 then on parliamentary procedure basics. So you've got 2 great resources. You got a lot of great resources in the agency on parliamentary procedure. Our General Counsel Scott Summers really has a lot of experience with parliamentary procedures, seeing that through a legal lens. And it's been an interest of mine for a long time, and I recently joined the National Association of Parliamentarians. That doesn't make me a parliamentarian, but I had to take a test to even be a member of the organization. And so I am really working too from a practical standpoint to be able to provide more guidance and assistance to the board on that matter, although you really have things nicely in shape that way. Scott has provided a document called Hints on Motions that continues to be useful. For example, saying I move versus I make a motion. There's lots of reasons that you'd want to say I move, that if you want to have an individual conversation about it, be happy to. There's also some basic parliamentary information from the National Association of Parliamentarians. NASB provides that from time to time. We have copies of. It's typically a yellow document. Laura provided some additional copies that are in a different color, but they'll look really familiar to you. And we've pulled from that then, if you look in 2C, some rules or rules of thumb for debate. And when I say rules of thumb, sometimes in smaller bodies like the state board, the rules aren't as heavily ascribed to, right? Because it's a little bit less formal than the legislature, for example. But some things to keep in mind. If you make the motion, you have the opportunity to speak first. And when you're making a motion, it says, I want to talk about this. I want discussion on this topic. It doesn't necessarily say that you agree with it. And then the person who makes the second is saying, yes, this is worthy of discussion. So again, that maker of the motion may speak first in discussion. Another point that isn't typically as, if you look at Roman numerat 2, that isn't maybe as, it's important, but maybe isn't as, doesn't happen as often here, is that ideally no one speaks more than twice on the same motion the same day. Now that, again, isn't something that we typically get into, but I think item number 1 below that is more relevant. Someone who has not yet spoken on a motion even once has preference over anyone who has already spoken on it. The idea there, everybody's been given an opportunity to speak once before somebody speaks twice. Now, it's up to the president to call on folks, but again, some standard practices that are followed in Robert's Rules of Order, which, by the way, your policies say for anything in the policy manual that we haven't outlined, we look to Robert's Rules of Order too. Sticking to the subject, keeping it germane, that the discussion is about the motion that's on the table, or the motion that's been made, rather. Some other things, and if you want to chat a little bit more about these one-on-one, debating issues, not personalities, right? And the debate should be directed to the president to keep it less personal and more about the item at hand. So some thoughts there. Any questions or thoughts on anything we've shared so far?
You might mention, as far as our policies and things are concerned, that the policy committee reviews those every 5 years or whatever we have a schedule.
Yes. And so I've got the rule revision process on another item here.
Okay.
So if I don't hit it there, I'll rely on you to tell me again. I'm going to move to the second page of that outline, which is relates to committee work. And I am really pleased with how this board has organized over the last few years with the 7 committees and taking the opportunity to start the discussion of action items at the committee level, bringing that up to the full board with recommendations in the work session, and then an opportunity then to take action on those in the business meeting with further discussion as necessary. It's important to note that committees are less formal than would be when you are in session. And it's important to keep in mind too that committees don't take action, right? So there aren't formal motions in committees, and the committee's authority is to make a recommendation to the full board. And so formal votes aren't taken in committee meetings, and keeping those pieces in mind as well. In terms of the general flow of work, I've outlined that here. A document that would be useful for you, and maybe even those of you who have been on the board for a while might not have seen recently, is this Guidelines for Staff Workflow and Protocol for State Board of Education Committee Work Meetings. This is a document that was presented to the board a little over 2 years ago, I think, by Dr. Fryson, was outlined. We provide this to our staff as well. This has been updated recently, and so if you've been seated on the board previous to this month, you might take an opportunity to look through this. Describes that process of business starting at the committee level and how it comes up through, what our expectations for staff are in that, and what the staff's role is in delivering the commissioner's recommendations to the committee and responding to questions and providing more information to the board in the work session and the business meeting. With respect then to what each committee does, that's outlined in bylaw 2, as I mentioned before. You might remember then, if you were here last year, that there is a program of work where different rules of the state board, the rules and regulations, have been assigned to different committees. That is pending now with the election of your president, and so we'll work with president and vice president to see what they want that program of work to look like, and we'll share that before the February meeting. In that then is the rule development process, because the policy committee that Pat mentioned, there's a review of the policies, there's also a review of the rules. And so each committee, almost all of the committees, have different rules that they are responsible for, where the discussion and recommendation starts. And so the bylaw on rule development is B13, and I've provided a copy of that with you. The commissioner intends to continue working through that rule development process and really empowering the board in their policy-making role in that process. And so we look to continue to improve that process as we move through the year. Lastly here is Spark navigation, and I know that Spark can be exciting for some folks because it's all in one place and it's electronic. It can be really frustrating for some folks because it's new, it's different. It might be something that just doesn't work as well for you. That's where we post the agenda as well as all of the items and the attachments. And so we typically post the agenda to the public 1 week before the meeting. Keep in mind that you have an opportunity to see that agenda as it's developing. I'd encourage you though to not get in there too early because it changes a lot and all of the attachments aren't necessarily there to get the full scope. But know that the Thursday before the meeting, you would have the opportunity to see most everything that you would need to see in order to prepare to come to the meeting for discussion on that topic. You can also get into the archived meetings. And so if you, again, need some one-on-one assistance with that, feel welcome to reach out. We can talk through it over the phone. Laura can help you with that as well so that you can access those archive meetings, which sometimes are important in that decision-making process. So, as I continue in this role, I get really excited about some of this stuff. It's not exciting for everyone. I encourage you to take an opportunity to review through those policies and others. Those are my, I don't know if there's 10 there, but it's like my top 10 of the ones that I think are key to be familiar with on an annual basis.
Yes, Rachel.
Ryan, would it be possible to put in Spark for before next month, the summaries? I think most committees had kind of a summary or recommendations for following forward for the next year. Could you add those into Spark for those of us that kind of want to review what those last recommendations were from last year?
Yeah, so we'll be happy to take those from the December meeting and put those into the February meeting. Got it right that time, the February meeting for a review. Mhm.
Brian, quick question. I'm sure during your orientations, you went over the monthly board reports for our distinguished new members.
Yes, and so I provided a copy of the first page of that in all of these handouts. Again, have that electronically.
Good.
And so again, the purpose of that is relating back to that policy on reimbursement for expenses, where your policy says that you will provide a regular report of the activities that you have engaged in. A lot more space in there for you to write about what you did on each of those events. So what we ask is that before the meeting begins each month, that you would email those to Laura or me, and we'll make sure that those are posted accordingly in Spark.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have one more. And I appreciate all this overview, but the one piece too maybe is just a little bit on the Open Meetings Act, just as a reminder of, some of the procedures
those
we need to keep
procedural
in mind
pieces.
around open meetings and email also.
Yeah, so I'll hit that topic unless Ryan wants to, but generally speaking, so if any, obviously our committees are structured so not to have a quorum of the board at any of our committees, right, or any other meeting, but I also just ask you generally to be aware of those requirements. So if, and maybe Scott's probably even the better one to be a bit more specific on this, but it generally wouldn't be appropriate that 5 of you were talking business about anything, right, at any one moment in time. And so just that's the basic thing, that you can't do that. Emails are one of those interesting ones, and I realized, I think I sent just a quick, welcome to the new year message, and then I thought to myself, oh, I've never shared that, and I didn't know if it had been shared like with our new board members. It's like replying all to an email is generally not a good idea. The intention of that is just to not even to fall into any gray area with those types of communications, and so thanks for that reminder. So if you do have questions, certainly Ryan and Scott have deep understanding of those things too. So,
Any other questions, concerns? Thank you, Dr. Ford. We will now move on to our action items. And we will move on to action item, excuse me?
I just see we have the consent agenda process on the report of
Sure.
rules yet, so I'll take those on really quick.
Sure, please.
First of all, consent agenda, a little bit different routine than normally. I would normally say, fill out your pink form, and I think you, from a new member perspective, both Deb and Robin are been informed on this. If you had anything you wanted to pull off consent agenda, fill out that form. Give them to Scott. Today, it's a little bit different, so if you have something, when we get to the consent agenda, just we'll make sure that no one wants to pull anything off at that point, so we'll handle that. There's a report on rules, I think, rules 91 and 92 are at the Attorney General's office, and so that's provided for you as well, and so I think that's otherwise it for my report, John, so.
Thank you, Doctor. Ryan?
I don't think he has
No
any
more?
more either, so.
With that, we'll move on to action item 9-3. Grant the Commissioner the authority to contract for the purposes of modernizing the educator licensing system. Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to grant the Commissioner the authority to contract for purposes of modernizing the educator licensing system.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rachel. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Neary,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Fricky,
Yes.
Kojans,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
In regards to the consent agenda, as the Commissioner was just speaking of, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Witzel,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Kojans,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Fricky.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you very much, Denise. We'll now move on to 12.1.A. Thank you for submitting your monthly report. Board member reports are linked in Spark, and I encourage you to review each member's report. Is there a motion to approve the meetings that took place in the past that were not previously approved for John Witzel and Lisa Fricky for attending the NCSA Legislative Conference on December 12, 2018? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Fricky,
Abstain.
Kojans,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Witzel,
Abstain?
Tim,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
6 yes to abstain.
Thank you very much, Denise. Our next action item is 12.2. Is there a motion to approve a meeting that took place in the past that were not previously approved for Lisa Fricky for attending the Open Sky Budget Forum on December 11th, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Kojans,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Fricky,
Can I interject a comment? It's relevant to this.
Can you do it after the?
I think it involves this vote. I signed up for this, but I didn't attend. And I did?
I think so. Because I think I was there too.
Never mind. It's
Okay.
a different date, sorry. I apologize. I
It's
was
just a
worried-
motion to approve it. If you did attend and we
Yeah,
find that you
yeah.
didn't submit something,
We're
that'll be
okay.
fine, yeah.
Not a problem, not a
so
problem.
Fricky,
Abstain.
Neary, wait, sorry, we already did this one. Stevens,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 abstain.
thank you, Denise. Next item is 12.3. Is there a motion to approve the future meetings participation?
So moved.
Thank you, Patsy. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, Denise, please call roll.
Fricky,
Yes.
Kojans,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Wise.
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
8 yes.
very good, thank you. The monthly board travel expense report is attached in Spark meetings for your review. If you would provide me one moment to clarify an issue here.
Yeah, I showed one more possibly that was a meeting, Lisa, on January 8th with Maddie Fennell that you requested. I don't think we took that one up as a vote. I think we only took up 2 of them, didn't we? So is that another one that we need to go ahead and approve? So maybe I'll have John ask for that motion, just to make sure we have it covered, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Okay.
I'm supposed
Very
to go
good.
Monday.
Very good. Is there a motion to approve meetings that took place in the past that were not previously approved for Lisa Fricky for attending a meeting with the president of the Education Association on January 8th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Rachel, second by Mo, okay. Any discussion on this motion?
To go this one.
Seeing and hearing none. Denise, please call roll.
Nichols?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Witzel?
Yes.
Wise?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Kojans?
Yes.
Fricky?
Abstain.
7 yes, 1 abstain.
Hey, just a little point of clarification. So as we do these different votes, and sorry about the confusion on that one, as we do these, the intention is basically to follow kind of new guidance that came along in the past, that board members can't approve their own expenses that happened in the past. Pre-approval is a different thing, and so sorry for a little bit of the confusion, but we want to make sure we follow that properly. So.
Okay, so 2 of those meetings I attended as well, but since I was absent for the December meeting, I did not put in for approval of them this time. So may I still go back? Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, you can still do that. So for next meeting, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want to interrupt the flow of this meeting, but
Sure.
I would like to have them approved.
Okay, certainly.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll continue on. The next items are information items and written reports for the board and for our information only. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to adjournment. Thank you for those who tuned in the broadcast. A work session will be held on Thursday, February 7th at 2 p.m., and a board meeting will be held on Friday, February the 8th at 9 a.m. in this room. The January State Board of Education meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay, the officers, I have. Yes.